Welcome to Crunching Data, where we go behind the scenes with the data leaders who keep it all flowing. We're talking real stories, real challenges, and the future of data from the people building it. This is Crunching Data, a podcast brought to you by Matia, the unified data ops platform. Let's get into today's episode.
Hey everyone, this is Benjamin Segal, the co-founder of Matia, the unified data operation platform. And this is Crunching Data. Today we are here with Eric Gonzalez. First time we are doing this in person, and I'm very lucky to call Eric a friend and having him with me here in Miami. Currently, Eric is running a consultancy, and I'll let him kind of like deep dive a bit more about himself and share what he's currently doing.
Awesome. Thank you, Ben. And thank you for having me. I know we've ideated on this and talked about this, so it's nice to see it come to fruition. And, pleasure to be sharing the proverbial stage with you on the podcast today.
Thank you for coming. Can you share a bit, Eric, about the past few months? I know you've been moving from leading data teams and working deeply with data teams and what you're doing today. I know today you're doing a lot of very interesting things and you're at the beginning of them. So we'd love to hear a bit.
It's been a wild couple of months, and this year has been an amazing year. And for some things, I'm at the onset of them. For other things, I've been building them quietly for several years, and now it's finally coming to fruition. So right now, my main focus is Omnificity, which is my executive advisory and fractional data leadership firm. And so for the last several years, I've been building this sort of in stealth, but just working with clients in a variety of engagements spanning from more data strategy work to helping hire or build data teams for customers or serving as a part-time operator within the business. And so it's been very rewarding and very fulfilling. And I finally took the leap full-time a couple of weeks ago. In addition to that, I'm building an offshore consultancy right now that will be focused more on like the implementation dev side of things. That will be based out of Eastern Europe, which I'm really excited about. And there's a couple other projects that I'm working on that are adjacent to the work, but I'm just more so thinking now that I'm on my own more creatively around how do I scale me, how do I scale the businesses that I have, and is that something that I can productize or bring to market for other consultants, freelancers, fractional leaders, etc.
Can you share a bit about how you got into data? I know we talked a bit about neuroscience. We both have loved to kind of like how the brain is working. And I think it's becoming more and more interesting today with AI, just understanding how much unknown is within AI and how much there is some similarity to the way our brain is working. Can you share a bit how you got into data? I know you could have gone many other routes in your life and you decided to go into data.
I mean, I don't think anybody wakes up one day and says, data is what I want to do. Maybe they do now because AI is so present in our everyday life, or at least within the marketplace of ideas. But when I was growing up, one of the early memories I have is my dad, before I could play video games or watch TV, would have me do multiplication tables. And so I was like 4 or 5 years old doing my multiplication tables from 1 to 12. And that was where I learned that I have a real passion for numbers in general. Throughout my life, I was always good at math. I always excelled at math. And math is one of the core fundamental disciplines within anything data or AI related. And so when I went into school, I thought I wanted to be an engineer. Went against that my freshman year, opted instead for neuroscience, which we can definitely touch on. And my junior year, I realized I don't think I want to be a doctor anymore. And so I got a double major in economics, wasn't sure what I wanted to do. And when I started applying for jobs, the job that I ended up landing was as a BI data analyst for a revenue cycle management company based out of Chicago. And that was my first foray into data from a professional standpoint. And within 6 months, I automated the majority of my role using Power BI, converting something that was a SQL data dump into Excel, very manual, very rote, monotonous. With automating my role in 6 months, somebody on the team left and I ended up taking over his responsibilities. They didn't backfill my position. And that was my first like light bulb moment of, I just saved this company close to $100,000 within 6 months, and they didn't have to backfill that position. And that is the power of what data can do from just a pure automation standpoint. And it's just grown ever since.
Got to feel good to save 100K when you're just at the beginning of your career in companies. I know we talked quite a bit when we meet about leadership and data leadership and in general thinking about what it means to work with people. And I know many people today talk about data tools and data stack and tech, but they don't really talk about the human aspect of what data strategy is. I know you're a big fan of the concept of data strategy and things cannot move only by buying tools. We need to also think about the strategy behind them. Can you share a bit about data strategy? How do you see data strategy? Why is it a necessary thing? what happens when a company doesn't think that way and they just, throw problems and challenges on the team and not really understanding the big picture of thinking kind of like a long-term on a data strategy in a company.
Yeah, absolutely. And from a data strategy perspective, like the way that I view data now, having been a practitioner and now working with executives and building teams, data is present in every single business, every single position, in all walks of life. Like from where we are today, for you to get home, you're probably going to have to open Google Maps and figure out how to get there. You might Uber and they'll take you over there. But from your house to a grocery store, you probably know the route like the back of your hand. You don't really need consciously observe where you're going. You just know the direction of where you're going. And that is because you've collected enough data points to become an unconscious observer in your own life for that thing. And the same thing can apply to if you're a waitress or you're a barback at a restaurant. You're monitoring, well, this table is about to be done with their appetizers. I'm going to take them their entrees. This person this bottle is about to run out of liquor. So I need to go restock it or refill it. And so people are always observing and viewing data in their day-to-day operations of their life. It's just people overcomplicate it with saying, oh, we need a fancy dashboard or AI model or something like that. And that is where I think people run into some issues today of building a data strategy that is cohesive from all the inputs from all their systems and people from an acquisition standpoint to from a consumption standpoint, how they can make inferences or gain insights from everything they've collected and all the integration that goes in the middle. And so as I think about a data strategy, I'm trying to think about from an operational standpoint, how are we interfacing with our customers, which might be our actual external customers or internal people who are operating within our company? How are we collecting all the information, making sense of it, integrating it? And then how are we presenting that from a consumption standpoint so that people can start to build hypotheses, test them, and then that is how you develop strategy over time. To bring it back to neuroscience, I would say there's two things that I've carried with me that I really love from neuroscience. One of them is the scientific method within business. I think a lot of organizations today try to do p-hacking, which for those who are unaware of what p-hacking is, it's trying to identify the hypothesis before making it and then having a statistically significant result because you basically already predicted the ending. And I think that's where a lot of organizations get caught up today from a confirmation bias standpoint is they try to predict the ending or they know where they want to go. And so they just find data to support their argument instead of saying, I don't really know everything. Here's what my thoughts are. And then you find data to test that. And you may have to do a 180 from what your initial strategy was. So from a scientific method standpoint of gathering a bunch of observations, making a hypothesis, testing that hypothesis, and then either leaning into that or walking away from it. That is one thing that I think has been very beneficial from a neuroscience standpoint. The other one, you mentioned people. Neuroscience is the psychological understanding of biological function or vice versa. And so the biggest thing that I gained from doing neuroscience or taking neuroscience was just understanding what makes people tick, what makes people operate, what are their motivations, what are the incentives that you can develop or build as a leader for a team. And I think that that sort of emotional intelligence when it comes to how you interact with people and how you serve as a leader is what motivates great teams to be extraordinary and what actually people gravitate towards from a leadership perspective.
Do you think it changed over time? So if you look at yourself, starting in Chicago and where you are today, what are the key things you learn for this path of, managing teams, working with teams? You've been working with multiple different industries. So also looking at different industries, most likely some are more conservative, some are running faster. What is like one thing that you recommend people or you learn in the process around leadership, specifically in data teams, in a group of people trying to solve a problem?
I think this is agnostic of whether it's data, operations, sales, whatever. Like actually having a conversation with the person that you're leading or the team that you're leading and saying, what is it that you want or what is it that you want to get out of this? And making it agnostic of the position as well that they have to say, well, you're trying to understand that person's motivation and you're trying to understand with the position that they hold in your company, what they enjoy doing, how that is going to benefit or behoove your company to set them up for success. I think a lot of leaders that I've worked with or that I see just say, we have a bunch of work to do. Now go carry out this work. And it's more of, I want everybody around me to be order takers and yes people, rather than me actually listening to you and understanding what are your motivations, where are you coming from, and trying to pair the work that we have to what your motivations and drives are. From a data leadership perspective, I see this all the time, and I'm sure you've experienced this as well, where somebody will be installed as the chief data officer, the head of data, just because they were the most proficient or the best developer. And you need to think about that for a second. If you just put your best developer as the data leader, you've probably taken 50 to 75% of their time at least, and now dedicated it to more administrative work, more leadership oriented work. And you're not going to have them doing code reviews, developing code, or doing the things that they enjoy doing. If they want to make that transition, fine. But did you have that conversation with them, or did you just plug them in there because they had the most amount of tenure, or because you thought that they were the smartest person? You may instead have somebody who maybe is your second, third, or fourth individual on the team in terms of coding proficiency, but really has a knack for leadership and a desire to be a leader. And that just then becomes a conversation with that person and with the senior data person of saying, hey, senior data person, this position could be yours, but here's what you're sacrificing if you take it, which is what you enjoy doing, what you want to continue doing. Instead, I'm going to put Ben, who has a drive for leadership and doesn't really care to continue to grow as an individual career from a coding perspective. I'm going to put him in the role and you stay in your role, and you'll just have a tight partnership. So I think it's listening to people and not just trying to fit a square peg into a round hole, and actually matching their skill set to the work that needs to be delivered. It's not going to be there 100% of the time, but if you do it and if you do it correctly, people will notice that. And that's how you actually get people to stay with you and work at your company for as long as it's operating.
Amazing thoughts. Yeah, many times I see people putting the wrong people in not necessarily the right place at the right time. And I think many times having leadership conversation with the people you're working with is critical. And I think many of us are forgetting to do that. I don't know how many leaders are watching this right now, but think when was the last time you were talking with people under you or with you or colleagues? And when was the last time you were talking with them about what their career trajectory is? Many times we either forget that or don't want to deal with that or put it aside for the right time, but there is no really right time. So kind of like we need as leaders to constantly think and put that as a priority, because now, if not, it's so easy to make it a non-priority. I think there is something that I would tell myself constantly looking back at life in general is like, look at the people you're working with and driving kind of like the boat to success, and make sure that you're not just treating them from a professional standpoint, also talking with them constantly about where they want to be in life and care about them, and really building a team that is there to drive together and not just, get professional outcomes. We need them, but we can get way better professional outcomes operating that way. Now, data has a lot of marketing in it. In the past 10 years, I think the same term been coming around like 5-7 times. So we can say, transformation had like 7-8 way of looking at it, from SSIS to DBT to Python transformation to bronze, silver, like silver, bronze, gold, etc. Same thing, different names, a lot of marketing. How do you look about, data products, and what do you think companies get kind of like the concept wrong? There are a lot of companies that are talking about, data products. We've been hearing that a lot in the past 2-3 years. Same goes to semantic layer. But then over time, you see those concepts kind of like either going away, or people try to implement them and maybe not necessarily implemented them properly. And where do you think people get some of those concepts wrong? Maybe going too much with marketing, but what do you think about those concepts, and kind of like where do you think people get them wrong?
I think it stems from they treat them like concepts instead of treating it like a fundamental problem. And the way that I see most businesses operate is they'll work the technology angle first, then try to resolve their people gaps or people problems, and then they focus on process. And it's the broken processes that got us here in the first place. So when I go into an organization, I don't really care what product you're using. Like, one of the hyperbolic statements that I'll say to people is like, if you can draw on a napkin a data point that I can make a decision off of, that serves me better than a machine learning model that I never touch. So whatever products you're buying for your organization, you need to make sure that you have the fundamentals down today. Because if you don't, when AI comes about, or Gen AI comes, or in 5 years, it's, quantum computing or something like that. If you don't have the fundamentals set up for your business, you're looking at a 3 to 5 year roadmap at least to get to that point. And there's companies that I work with today that are still using COBOL mainframes as part of the operations within their business. And that's because they have a bunch of business logic that is tied to those COBOL mainframes that is core to their operations. And this is common in financial services, it's common in healthcare, it's common in retail, where if they shut that off, the enterprise would crumble, or at least it would be at a standstill for a good period of time. And they end up hiring back people that retire or keep them on retainer for 10-15 hours a week for maintenance. And it is crazy, but that's because people have tried to retrofit these systems with technology consistently over time. And whether it's good marketing or good salespeople, good sales tactics, people are sold on this idea that tech is a magic bullet that's going to resolve all of their issues. And then when it doesn't come to fruition, well, now they look for the next thing that's going to solve those issues because they don't want to look in the mirror and say, maybe these issues have just been exacerbated by the fact that I haven't paused for a second to reflect on the state of my business, the state of the things that I have built, and how I need to unravel that and unwind it to optimize it for any future state needs. So when I'm meeting with a business or I'm speaking with an executive, I'm trying to understand from a fundamental, foundational perspective where they're at. Because if you're just trying to apply AI to solve your business, but all of your underlying data, they're siloed, not integrated, there's like shadow IT or shadow data between different departments, maybe you'd be good at AI for a specific narrow use case that is geared towards marketing or is geared towards HR, but you're not going to be able to have something that's enterprise grade that goes across all of the systems until you resolve all those process gaps and issues.
You talk about the fact that many organizations are not ready for AI, even though they want to move pretty fast with AI, etc. How common is this on your case? Like, you're looking at many type of enterprises and also small businesses, not just enterprises. How often do you see companies not having, I don't think data lake is necessarily what they need, but like, people still working on Excel and Google Sheets and kind of like very old fashioned for data.
Every company that I've ever worked with. There are very few companies that I've worked with that have everything streamlined and optimized in a single system, where it is like, if you were to take or ask AI, build me the modern data stack or whatever modern is today, and give me all the tools and systems that I would want to operate with, there's very few companies that fit that architecture to a T, because you'll have companies that have gone through M&A activity that have several systems that they're still trying to cobble together. You have companies that are in the process of migrating from SAS to Databricks or from on-prem SQL Server into Snowflake. And there's a period where you have to have this transition and the sunset, and they have core operations that didn't migrate well over to Snowflake. So now they need to keep the lights on for both and manage and maintain both. I think that the bigger the company, from what I've seen, the harder it is, not even from like a budget, they just, from an organizational change management perspective, cannot get out of their own way and end up exacerbating the issue because they'll buy new tech, it doesn't work. So they buy another new tech and they buy another new platform, and they just continue to layer on all of this technology. And then it's like a game of telephone from the source to when it is consumed. So yeah, there's not really any business. Maybe you'll see like a startup or a small business that does have a clean environment that you're able to work with. But from an enterprise perspective, it's not going.
You talked a bit about change management. I think many people don't understand necessarily the difference in enterprise from change management and a startup or, SMB company. Can you share a bit about some of the change management complexities you're seeing and some things you recommend maybe potentially that can avoid or reduce the change management complexity as a problem? Because it is a problem. People might be at the place for 10, 15 years and take decisions as just because they have the power to take decision rather than go with what's right or what's wrong. Or some things I saw is people might move between companies and bring the same consultancy that might be the wrong consultancy for that specific business they're working with. So I'm wondering, how do you treat change management and what recommendation you might have from what you saw so far about improving decision-making when management is either idle, means it's too long in a company, or there is too much of a change management?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think it starts
like a balance. Why do you need the balance? But
yeah, the balance for me. So if you look at early stage companies, or you even like companies like Mattia, you all likely have a lot of innovation happening, but less process. And that is just the nature of being a startup, the nature of being scrappy. You need to make decisions quickly, shift, pivot, use this product, etc. But it's not many degrees of separation from somebody who asks a question to you approving it. If you go look at a Fortune 100 company, this is a multinational global company, you're going to have to submit a request for getting a change done. There's probably some PMO or project management office meeting that is going to review the projects that have been requested. All of that, depending on the level of the cost and from a procurement standpoint, is going to have to get a variety of signatures. If it's under a certain threshold, maybe it only needs a VP. It's over a certain threshold, maybe it needs a global VP, maybe it needs the C-suite. There's just layers just to make a request. Then once that request gets approved, now it needs to be measured from a resource allocation to demand planning perspective. Do we have the resources to do this? Do we need to hire a consultancy? Where does this fit in terms of our project timeline? How does it disrupt the current work that we have in flight or the work that we're going to have in the future? So there's just more process, and that stifles innovation to an extent for a larger company. This isn't even getting into the regulatory bodies of if you're a financial services firm, healthcare, or you're subject to like the GDPR, CCPA, anything like that from a governance perspective, that is going to add additional layers in terms of that approval process or the rigor that needs to go from a procurement or development standpoint. So from my experience, there's just, as you get bigger as a company, you have to have a trade-off or the balance discussion of, all right, we need to sacrifice a bit of innovation for some process. And at a certain point, if we're big enough, it almost becomes more of like a conservation mode of we need to make sure that we're not hacked or attacked or we have no data leakage, et cetera. So we're going to have more robust processes to ensure that doesn't happen, but that comes at the expense of innovation. If you're an organization that is looking to innovate, but you're stuck in that area of like, hey, we have a lot of process, I would encourage them to find small use cases or, just teams where they can deploy something quickly. So maybe it's something that isn't going to fall under the compliance framework. And it's maybe an internal initiative that you're not going to be using customer data, but you can start to test out narrow use case that you use with your internal data. It doesn't need a many layer of approval. You do it on a cheaper SOW or statement of work so that you're able to execute and actually get some quick wins. And then from there, that makes your argument or your case stronger from a proposal perspective to whatever governing body or committee that you have. So you can tell them, hey, we tested this internally. This is how it worked. We're ready to go and get this done for our customers. But I think many times what I see is people try to bite off more than they can chew, and they try to do too much all at once. And then that's where you run into the issue of it being delayed, not having the right approvals, spending too much money, and then you waste a lot of time with not much result.
If we have data engineers or some leadership looking at us from enterprises right now, what would you say kept you, today you're in consulting world, a bit different, but what kept you when you were in these shoes of like, oh, I have some innovative idea, I want to push this idea, many times you might not get approved. What kept you going? What kept you energized to make sure things are moving and you're kind of like delivering more success to the organization? The reason I'm asking is because I feel like many of the organizations might lose or be behind in the current environment because people are, incentivized sometimes just not to be innovative, or they try one or two times and then they stop.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to think, how can you push your team members if you are a leader, or if you are yourself just want to push and move forward within the organization? What can you do, or how do you make people still incentivized and motivated to do things?
Yeah. My favorite thing about numbers is numbers don't lie. So people can lie with numbers. They can make the data say whatever it wants. But I think using the data to create or to tell your story is how you get buy-in and is how you show people that this is the better approach or the better way to go. And so you said, like, how do you stay motivated, or how do you turn a no into a yes? You just have to prove it to people. And the earlier example that I gave you of like automating my job and ended up taking over or not having to backfill the person that left, I was told no to get a Tableau license because Tableau was the industry leader at the time. Power BI had just come out. I didn't know about Power BI, but I knew about Tableau. I asked for it. They said it's $1,000 a seat. There's no way we're paying for that. And I just typed in on Google, free data visualization tool competitor Tableau, and then Power BI popped up. I said, okay, well, this is free for under a gig worth of data. I'm going to download the desktop version. I created all the reports, and then I showed it takes me 30 minutes to build reports today. It would take 11 seconds to refresh the report and export it for clients. So I'm saving us 99% time on this conversion. And then the VP was like, okay, yeah, we can deploy this. And so I think a lot of times no's stem from either fear or ego. If it's fear from a leader, is this unknown are we going to get in trouble with compliance? Is this going to disrupt operations? Is this something new that everybody's going to have to upskill in, and now it's going to come out of our budget? Is it too costly? Like all the unknowns that are there are what drives fear. I think from an ego perspective, and this also bubbles up to fear as well, it's like, I grew this company from $1 million to 10 million or 10 million to 100 million. Who are you to come in and tell me how to run my business, or who are you to come in and tell me how to do something? And I think with those types of conversations, or really with both, it's having those one-on-ones with that leader or having those team discussions and just getting, again, going back to like conversations with people and understanding what their motivation is. You just learn that with some people, they want to be bought into that process, and the tech is too complicated or out of their like realm of expertise, their scope. And so it's like, okay, you did grow this from 1 to 10 million. How do I understand how you did that? Well, I'm going to do it through data. Our data today aren't that great. If we get this product, we can probably reverse engineer the way that you built this from 1 to 10 million. And now you and your mind become scalable through this product and for the business. It's a much different conversation than me saying, hey, Ben, you're wrong. Here's why you were wrong. And here's how I want to show you that we could have been right had you not made these decisions. Then everybody's walls are going to come up and they're going to be cagey and defensive. And so for me, it all comes down to, again, like all of those conversations and understanding motivations with people. That is how you will build successful products in the future. And that is how you'll win over people when there's some.
Very interesting. It sounds like, you're taking the neuroscience concept of understanding people's mind to the farthest possible, which I think it's very, very innovative and amazing to see. I'm wondering how we can make more people feel like that when they go out of college and are going into a company, and understanding that if you build the case properly, it will be way easier for you to move in life and convince more people. I guess one question I have for you is, we are a big believer of mentorship. As time goes by, every day I'm learning more and more that if you can find people that are smarter than you and had experience in the spaces you want to be better at, and you can build bond with them, you can move 10x, 100x, 500x faster in life. It depends what you care about. Some people might care about success in their career. Some people in success in their family. It depends what you care about. I'm wondering, how do you view mentorship, and, if you have one good or bad thing to say about mentorship and the importance of mentorship for success in life. Not just success, the idea of like, you can see something that someone already did before you and learn from them. And maybe one sentence about finding a good mentor as well, because I think that's where many people are afraid of. Like, they're afraid of going for someone and then finding someone that might not be the right mentor for them. And from my experience of talking with people, if you find the right mentor for you, life is good. You're a big believer of mentorship, but many times you don't. So I'm wondering if you can share a bit about the idea of mentorship, and maybe how can you be careful or not careful finding the right mentor.
I think that most people, when they think of mentorship from the like mentee perspective, want to find people for what they did. What I realize mentorship is about is like finding somebody for who they are. So what they did is what they accomplished by being who they are. So if you just seek out people because of their accomplishments or the outcomes that they attained, you might not be happy with that person as a mentor because of the way that they went about getting that. If you instead index on the quality of the person, of characteristic of the person that you want to embody or you want to pursue, then that becomes a better place for you to find mentorship or seek mentorship. And it also doesn't have to be this formal thing where it's like, hey, Ben, I want you as a mentor and I'm reaching out to you. You can learn vicariously through reading from other people, watching other people, speaking to friends, going to networking events. Like, there's bits and pieces that I've learned from just understanding what people have done and how they got there that have become leadership traits or qualities that I've had, or like certain positions where I had like one instance in that role or at that company that I've carried with me for the rest of my life. So my biggest recommendation to people who are seeking out a mentor, like I said, is just finding people for who they are, because then if you strip out the outcomes perspective, you could find somebody who is like door-to-door salesman, but you just really love who they are at their essence. And that becomes a mentor for you, even though you are a marketing analyst for a company. Or you can find somebody who is a neurosurgeon and you might be a data architect, but you just really love the way that they go about like studying and honing in their craft. And because you see those soft skills that they have, you can adapt and apply that to what it is that you're doing. And so I think mentorship is crucial, but I think as long as people look at it from the right lens, then it can benefit them. As a mentor, I believe that a lot of it is like a letter to your younger self. And it's like, for me, I didn't know what consulting was until I graduated. I didn't know what data was as a profession until my first job. I didn't understand like business really, or have business acumen to the degree obviously that I do now, until being within the industry and going to events and meeting with a bunch of people. So as I speak to people who are looking for a career shift, graduating from school, or just looking for that next step or that next thing, a lot of it is like, I wish I had this when I was looking for a job. And that's some of what you're saying as well, is like, how do you people, or how do you help them see or experience what you've gone through already so that they can learn it and apply that for themselves? But it's also like what I say to you and my lesson from it, or what I experience from it. You might take that and interpret it completely differently because you're living your life. I'm just telling you how I experience it, and you're going to take that and make it into your own. And so as a mentor, I think it's important not to say like, you need to do this and this is what you need to do. It's more of a place of, this is my experience, and based off of what you're telling me, this is where I see the parallels, but it's up to you to make of that what you want.
I think what I'm learning from my experience, getting to know you now, again, I'm very happy to call you a friend in this process, but the importance of serendipity, I'm a big believer of that. We met through some cold LinkedIn message around neuroscience, not about data at all. And we met, and then we built friendship, etc. And I think one thing I encourage people who is watching this is, don't stop yourself from going for, even though we have a lot of AI SDRs and a lot of AI things that make your inbox full, don't be afraid of reaching out to people that you might be thinking are better than you or smarter than you or have more experience, because if you don't try, like, there is no way to get even the opportunity to meet your potential mentor. I know you're going to a lot of events for your career and getting to meet people on the ground. And it's crucial, I think, getting to meet the people in person, building those relationships, something we are losing, I think, a bit today, or post-COVID, we lost a bit at the human touch. I think we're going back to it, but very, very important to meet people. So, if people watching us, so many people are in the search for mentors, usually it comes when you don't plan it. Just like you see someone that you think, I can learn a lot from this person. I think in my experience, one thing I'm going to do after this show, I'm going to take a note and write a letter to my younger self. I did not plan that, but I heard you saying that, and it made me feel like that could be a very strong statement to see where you could have been if you look back kind of like 20 years, if you do this letter to your younger self, and then looking forward 20 years, can you apply these lessons, 20 years forward if you sit in the seats 20 years ahead? So you just made me thinking about something I'm going to do after this show. One question I have for you around tooling, I don't want to go too deep into tooling, but the data world saw a lot of changes in the past 10 years. And I think we're going to see a lot of changes in the next 10 years just because of the amount of data that's growing. Obviously, we have a pretty strong tools right now, which is Snowflake and Databricks and a lot of others, but I think there is so much going on, and we're going to grow with AI and a lot of other things. Do you have any kind of like underrated or overrated tools from your experience? And I know tools are they are just means to an end, but many people are in this space of like, they're thinking, what tool should they do or what should they use?
I think generally painting a broad stroke, something that is overrated for me is self-serve analytics. And like, I started my career as a BI analyst and building in Power BI, like I've seen its growth, but a lot of people over-index or overhype. Well, if you build it, they will come. And you are then telling those people that if you just build this now semantic layer or previously data set that somebody can access, that they're just going to magically know how to work in Tableau or Power BI or be able to glean the insights that they need to make decisions. And I think that's where a strong data leader comes into play, where I view a CDO as a blend of the chief operational officer and chief information officer. The CIO is more at the application level and understanding all the information flow within the business, whereas the COO is thinking about all the operations. You need to marry that information flow from the CIO to the decision flow of operations, and that's where a strong CDO comes into play. Self-service analytics is more of a federated approach to say, hey, business user, you figure out how this works, how it connects into your business, and you can figure out how to do math and coding and all this other stuff. I'm going to dump that onto your plate. Where I think the industry is starting to shift a little bit into, and I see more encouraging results from, is what I've deemed as more self-fed analytics. And so thinking about like alerting, subscriptions, monitoring, automated emails, etc., where you are actually sending something to someone that they've deemed as important from whatever business logic, and that activates them to now go to whatever dashboard that you've built for them. And now they actually start to use the data or understand it and start to ask questions, because if you just build self-serve and then people are left to their own devices, I just don't see the payoff as much. And so that is for me, my most overhyped thing. I think the most underrated thing, and I'm not just saying this because of what your company does, but from a data observability perspective, as well as from like a data cataloging or metadata management, that is a space that I think you continue to see growth there, obviously. But I've worked on projects where it's like a 6-month engagement just to build out a data lineage within Excel that is a leave behind. And I view that as like the exercise like a cartographer. The moment you publish it, it's out of date the next hour.
Maintenance is very heavy. Like making maintenance of that is.
It makes no sense. Like how, and especially now with AI and being able to like sit on top of your databases or your data infrastructure and be able to piece from, again, acquisition to consumption and everything in between, the flow of information and whether there is any leakage, errors, things that are omitted, et cetera, like that. People are spending in their organizations probably 2 to 3 FTEs worth of time because they don't want to invest $10K a year, $50K a year, $100K a year on a tool. They're like, no, that's too expensive. We're going to have a full-time person or 2 full-time people maintaining this, which means that it's always out of date except for the one day that they publish.
The biggest concern is, I think one thing we don't think of and many people forget about is change management. When someone leaves, what do you do at that point with this system that they build? You can share the knowledge and get someone onboarded, but many times those systems are built for the person who build them rather than a generic system when it builds very fast internally.
And going back to like the fear ego piece, I think a lot of people will build the infrastructure and make it walled off from the rest of the organization as like a proxy of job security. But it's the worst thing that an organization can let happen is having somebody wield that much power, because what if they just went on vacation? You have to bother that person the entire time while they're on vacation. They complain about it or they don't get back to you, and they have they're the underpinning of your entire data infrastructure. And so that is more vital to me or more critical to me from like an insider threat, even though it's not like what we'd consider a traditional threat, but you're giving that one person this tower of knowledge that is the backbone of the organization, and no one understands it like they do. And that is where a lot of the organizations, like I said earlier, have COBOL or have these old antiquated systems that one person maintains because they're the ones that built it, and nobody is just going and trying to unravel what that is.
Looking ahead, what is like most exciting for you for the fact that we're having kind of like business becoming more data oriented and many new businesses are based on new data system or more advanced data system? What is like most exciting for you for that future of better data systems?
Yeah. I think what's most exciting for me is because AI, or rather Gen AI, was the first tech revolution that's happened that a non-technical person could put something into one of these LLMs and get a result back, that everyone has stopped thinking about data as this like amorphous thing that I don't want to touch or I don't understand how to do, when in reality, data is synonymous with information and everybody wants better information to make better decisions. So that is what is most exciting for me, is all enterprises in the industry as a whole are talking about data more from like a fundamental or pragmatic point of view now, because there's a recent study that came out, I believe, from MIT. It was like 95% of initiatives are likely to fail. I think it's probably 99%. And that's because we're stuck in POC purgatory. They built some really cool edge use case that really worked well for that month that they had it. And now they put it into production, and now it doesn't get the results that they wanted. So I think over the next 2 to 3 years, you're going to have a lot of people who are shifting back to say, hey, maybe we need to build that foundational infrastructure and we need to get everything in order so that we can take advantage of AI or these other systems. Again, you can do that concurrently while building AI for those narrow use cases, but you're not going to get to the enterprise level until you actually build that foundational infrastructure. So I'm really excited for the next 2 to 3 years of truly building out the foundations across enterprises and getting people to talk about data from more of an operational standpoint of how is this going to drive and be embedded as a partner for strategic work, and not as just more of an order taker where it's like, hey, go find me this report, go find me this data. It's, well, what are the data telling us? And then using those insights to build out the strategy, and then running multiple strategies at once and picking the one that best fits or best delivers results.
You need a lot of agents for different strategies. What is your most controversial data opinion?
Question. Probably that, like, the fact that most organizations just are not using data in the right way, or most, I would say instead of that, 90% or more of organizations don't need AI. It's probably the most controversial one, just the state of what we're doing. If you actually look at what people are requesting, they want some simple linear regression model, or they want some simple automation for their operations. They don't really need AI. And so actually thinking about too with LLMs, I'm not as bullish on LLMs from a long-term perspective as I am on small language models, because a small language model that can be run locally or be run within a business, like on their own servers, that's much better from a security standpoint. And the LLMs, if you need to have some sort of like latency into hitting against the data center and pulling that information back, that is not going to be a scalable model for a small business. It might work for enterprise customers or enterprise clients, but it's not going to be scalable for a small business. And so I think that from a neuroscience perspective, it's much better to have a bunch of SLMs and then have multiple reasoning agents that then fire off into those SLMs in order to pull back or retrieve the information or do that specialized task than it is to have a generalized LLM that can do everything all at once. And so I think about that the same way with the brain. Like if you're driving, you're using primarily your prefrontal cortex and your occipital lobe to look and see on the road. Maybe you use your temporal lobe to read the signs or do whatever. You're not using your entire brain the entire time. And I think that's the same way that these models are going to work as we look towards the future.
Eric, thank you for joining us, Crunching Data. Can you share with the audience a bit about where they can read more about you or find more about you as you are kicking off your consultancy? I'm a big fan, but want more people to hear about you or read about you.
Yeah. So on all platforms, it's EG Data Guy. So that's on LinkedIn, TikTok primarily, and then working on developing YouTube Shorts and all that. Also, we'll be launching a podcast soon called Data Unfiltered. So love to have you as a guest on there when I have that. And also relaunching my newsletter, which will be on Beehive.
Amazing. It's amazing to see that you're on so many channels, and as someone that is kind of building presence on online or offline today myself, or trying to as much as I can. It's amazing to see your continuity and persistency, because I think without that, you cannot really do that. People think it's very easy to make a LinkedIn post or make a TikTok video. It's not that easy to manage. I have big appreciation for the hard work you're doing in building this up. So congrats on your new route, and thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thank you. And I mean, from that standpoint with content creation, it's all about just doing it and putting yourself out there, because I would have never met you had I not put myself out there and publish on LinkedIn. You're the first person to drive over to the suburb that I live in Miami and meet me over there. And like you said, it's built a budding friendship. And so I've built several relationships with people that I otherwise would have never met had I just not posted and been consistent about it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to another episode of Crunching Data, brought to you by Matia, the unified data ops platform. You can find us at matia.io.